Welcome to today's Cybersecurity Insiders webinar on Zero Trust, best practices for securing the remote workforce. Thank you all for joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedules. Today's webinar is brought to you by Ivanti. And Ivanti makes the everywhere workplace possible by securing, healing, and protecting endpoints regardless of location. My name is Holger Scholze. I am the founder of Cybersecurity Insiders, the online community for cybersecurity professionals, and I'll be your moderator today. Now it is my pleasure to welcome our featured presenter, Vladimir Araujo. And Vladimir is Senior Director of Product Management at Ivanti. Hello, Vladimir. Thank you for presenting today.
Well, thanks for having me, Holger. Thanks for everybody for taking time for this.
Excellent. Thanks for presenting today. And so let's jump right in. I mentioned 2021 Zero Trust report a minute ago. So basically, enterprise adoption of the Zero Trust security model, right, is very quickly gaining momentum. You know, as a majority of organizations plan to implement Zero Trust capabilities, right, to mitigate growing cyber risk, and especially in the wake of the massive shift to remote work that we all experienced over the course of the last 12 plus months. And we just released the 2021 Zero Trust report based on a comprehensive survey, right, to reveal how enterprises are, how they're implementing Zero Trust security in their organizations, right, including key drivers, adoption trends, technologies, investments, and more. Now, one of the first questions we asked in our survey is, to what extent do users have access privileges beyond what they require? And we all know, right, that determining current actual access privileges for users, that can be a daunting task across an organization, especially now with, remote distributed workforce. So the true number is probably even higher than what the survey revealed, which is that almost 9 out of 10, so 88%, of organizations acknowledge that users have access privileges beyond, what they require to do their jobs. And that is close to 9 out of 10. That's close to almost all users, right, Vladimir? Now, does the extent of this sort of excessive access privilege picture that we're seeing, does this surprise you?
No, not at all. It's very hard to assign the right privileges to begin with. And as you see, and we'll talk about this during the webinar, it's even harder to make it work in synergy with the network access. And we hope that the ZTA approach, or the Zero Trust Network Access approach, will help mitigate that problem.
Yes, perfect. Looking forward to learning more about that. Next, we asked organizations, what identity access and Zero Trust security controls they are actually prioritizing and investing in, right? And the priority, just from an investment and focus perspective, is clearly on a handful of things, right? Multi-factor authentication, here at 58%, followed by identity management and governance, 48%, and single sign-on at 45%. And much of that is clearly driven, as we can see, right, by the recent shift to remote work. Vladimir, quick question. What are your thoughts when you're looking at these access and Zero Trust priorities? And I'm just curious, how do they align with the bigger trends that you're seeing toward Zero Trust?
Based on what I've seen, microsegmentation is growing. The need for microsegmentation is growing because with all the recent ransomware attacks and all other types of cyber attacks that we've known, and some of us have inside knowledge in these areas, the idea of containing the lateral movement of threats is gaining more and more prominence. And to make that work properly, you do need a corresponding technology to enable you to access the right segments of your network. And that is the whole idea behind the ZTNA. So I believe that these numbers here will actually increase quickly in the coming years.
Excellent. Thank you, Vladimir. So I'm curious, how does Ivanti approach this, and what can you tell us about how to secure this remote workforce with Zero Trust?
Okay, so let's start looking at it at a very high level. right? So the whole point of access controls is to eliminate this inside-outside distinction. It doesn't really happen anymore. We all know that the users are everywhere, applications are everywhere, and it's not just everywhere, they are everywhere, and these places are very different from each other, right? So whatever solution that comes up with, it has to consider this multi-cloud environment. It needs to take into account that the users are really the new edge of your network. And you need to secure that user for his entire journey. And that's what we're going to cover a little bit more here. And so the challenge is always from an operational perspective. How do you make sure that you can operate this effectively, efficiently, in a way that also does not get you dependent on particular clouds or particular underlying infrastructures? And that's the overall approach that we're taking here. And the first, I think, big move is moving away from a VPN model to a zero trust access control model. And the overall fundamentals is that VPN brings you access to the network, from the start. That's why it was designed. It's a great technology, and it's still going to be available and used for many years to come. But as we evolve our deployments over the networks, over clouds and hybrid scenarios, and with a more mobile workforce, we do need to have more visibility. We need to have more granular controls on applications. And you really need to simplify administration and the end user experience. So it needs to be easy to do all these things, because the number of applications is not going to shrink. The number of users is not going to shrink. The complexity of your networks are also not going to shrink. So the solutions that we create have to address this overall growth and complexity in an automatic way. So to really put this into perspective, I always like to contrast the paradigms. The fundamental VPN paradigm is that you have a user, an employee or contractor, whoever that person is, creating a VPN connection to your network. That endpoint of the tunnel we call the gateway, the VPN gateway. And so the user has to know what the gateway is. Once he gains access to the network, he has complete access to the entire network. So now the traffic from that user can reach all of these applications. So basically, that's a flat network, which enables the lateral movement of traffic. So whenever you get breached, and we always should assume that we will eventually get breached, that the threat can navigate across your network at that point in time. Okay. The VPN also look only at the user perspective. Some VPNs solutions have more capabilities in terms of device compliance checks and so on and so forth, but the vast majority is very focused on plain user access controls. And you always have to know where to connect. So from an operational perspective, this also complicates things very much for the end users. When you move to the ZTNA paradigm, you can see things are fundamentally different. You now have a micro-segmented network in which applications in each segment are only accessible from a user that establishes a connection to a gateway protecting that segment. So which means that if a particular segment, let's say the segment that has the yellow application here, gets compromised, gets breached, that malware, that threat, whatever that is, will be contained within that segment. So it allows you to take the appropriate remediation without impacting the rest of your network. To make all this work, of course, you now need to authenticate not just the user, you need to understand which application that user is going to access from a network perspective, not from an application perspective, we all do that, but from a network perspective, to grant the traffic to that application the right passage to your network. And you also need to understand also where is this user coming from, to understand the risk that user might be bringing into your network and to the specific applications this user wants to access. And the third point is what we call the dark network. The system itself selects where to send a tunnel, which gateway that user, which multiple gateways that user needs to connect to access a particular application. The user itself is not making that determination. The system makes that determination for the user. So that's what allows you to have much better operations and much better security. So, and by the way, everything I talked about is general purpose. It's not specific to what we do. On how we do specifically, you'll see some things here. So as we talked about, the idea is that we need to authenticate users. So we have what we call our Ivanti neurons for zero trust access, what we call here NZTA. We have this controller. It's hosted in Azure, so it's a SaaS application, a cloud application. The user establishes that connection to the controller, and the controller deals with authenticating that user. As part of the user authentication, the controller will also understand the privileges and access controls of that user. All this is controlled by policy, and those policies can be extremely fine-grained, extremely comprehensive, not just about the applications, but the requirements in terms of device compliance from that user. Also location, awareness. So certain locations are considered higher risk than other locations, basically from a geolocation of the user at the particular point in time. So all these constraints can be taken into account to determine which applications a particular user has access to at any particular point in time. So that's the first step. We authenticate that user and you understand that. Once that happens, the controller will say, oh, these are the gateways that are fronting these segments of the network that's hosting those applications. And we'll communicate these policies to these gateways to enable them to accept connections from this particular user. So again, zero trust. We don't trust anything. Right? So the idea is that the gateways don't trust the device don't trust the gateways until the right policies are put in place for them to enable a connection to be established. At this point in time, the data plane connections are then established, and the traffic can flow from that user to those microsegments, and therefore the user can access the particular applications. But as you know, security is not something that's static. The user is not sitting idle doing nothing. He is moving around. His time is going by. He's adding things into the devices. He's doing things with the devices that could increase the risk of that device being compromised. And as we evaluate those policies, the controller will make the determination that maybe the device is no longer acceptable in the way its current form to be able to connect to those particular applications. So that's where we're talking about more details of how we do it. But the controller basically will make that determination that, hey, this device is no longer at the right level of compliance, and therefore I will interrupt that connectivity. So that is done in real time as the user moves over time. And when things, of course, are remediated, the connections can be established again. So because of all this, approach, what are the fundamental benefits of our NZTA solution? Obviously, it's a multi-cloud access. Really, the applications can live anywhere. They can be on-prem, they can be on a virtual private cloud, it can be a public cloud. You can have really a unified zero trust access across all the domains of your applications. We do have the full end-to-end security because as I mentioned before, we have this dark cloud mode, and we have the zero trust model in which no single point is trusted for anything. So the policies have to be established dynamically to enable the dynamic connection establishment. And these policies, they're very fine-grained to really control the behavior of the user and understand the risk assessment of the user at that particular point in time. One of the typical problems that exist on the VPN world is the complexity to deploy. So as we talked about, now we have this controller that I call this big brain. Right? The controller really sees everything and understands where the applications are, where the users are, where the gateways are. And therefore, the user does not have to. So when the user decides to establish that control plane connection with the controller will make the determination where does my user need to connect to have the best possible experience? So all that complexity goes away from a deployment perspective, from an operational perspective, and so we can achieve much faster deployment time of new applications, as well as new gateways, new sites, and obviously high availability scenarios, best routes, best distance, and so on and so forth. All those things are automatically built into the system. As again, compared to a traditional VPN, we are now moving to a centralized form. So having the advantages and the power of the cloud to give you better visibility and analytics on everything that you're doing. So with that visibility, you understand exactly what each user is doing, and you understand the risk profile of a device, not just at the time that the device connects into a particular location or particular gateway, but all the time. So you can really have proactive response to understand the risk profile of a particular device and take steps to remediate those non-compliances. And the final point, which is always important, needs to be easy for everybody to use this product, to purchase, to deploy, and to enable it into the network. So the pricing model from Ivanti is fundamentally user-based licensing, and which gives you a limited number of gateways to deploy. You can deploy one gateway, you can deploy 5,000 gateways, as long as it aligns with your security strategy from a segmentation perspective. You're free to do whatever is best for you without an impact on licensing. For the many existing Pulse Secure customers, you can continue to use the existing clients you have. There is no change on those clients, of course, so please update to the latest version. The same client can be used to connect you both to your ZTNA access, to your VPN access, to your network access controls. So no impact on the end user from refreshing or installing new clients. And of course, with all this automation that we talked about, it's very easy to scale up to support new users, new clients, new sites. So those are the fundamental benefits: better operations, better security. And we talked a little bit about the client coexistence, right? So how do you make it work? So with Ivanti, we have a single client, which is with the before acquisition, the Pulse Secure client, or the Pulse Desktop client, the mobile clients, etc. You have a seamless experience between all the Pulse products, now Ivanti products, our Pulse Connect Secure, or Pulse Policy Secure, and now the Ivanti Neurons for Zero Trust Access. All of them, they can be connected from the exact same client, so much easier to coexist. And we can coexist all, obviously, with other VPNs. So if you're coming from a different VPN and you want to deploy our NZTA product, these products can coexist harmoniously. And everything has been designed with the expectation that you are not going to make a hard movement from a VPN to a zero trust architecture. This will take time. And the products are designed to coexist and enable this migration at whatever pace is acceptable to each one of you. So talking a little bit about the analytics, right? So it's always nice to be able to see everything, but the fundamental intent here of analytics is to improve your overall security and to improve your overall operations. So the first aspect is what's called the CART aspect, the continuous adaptive risk and trust assessment. So the idea is that we build this risk profile for a user, for a device, and we understand that perspective and take that risk score into account when accepting or not a connection from a particular device to a particular application at any particular point in time. And so we take all these aspects into consideration when determining eligibility for connection. So that's the first step. The second, I think, very important aspect for security operations is the user and entity behavior analytics, or UBA. The whole idea here is understanding what's called normal behavior for a user, and that's on a user basis, okay? And be able to understand anomalous behavior. So once you normalize the behavior of a user, you want to determine what is anomalous for that user so that you can prioritize incident investigation for your security operations teams. Typical examples is this user always accesses the applications during business hours and suddenly is accessing in the middle of the night and maybe now from a different country. This could be right, the user could be traveling, or this could be an attack. So the whole idea is that the system will bubble up these anomalies and enable your security operations team to to prioritize those investigations and take the right decision based on those things by either saying, yeah, this is normal, this user is traveling, really, that's fine, or cutting access from that user, or maybe just from that device, because maybe the device was compromised, but not the user. So all those things are possible with the product. So enabling fast and focused security operations response. So as you look from a best practice perspective, what should you do when deploying a zero trust application? And that applies to everybody. This is not just for our product. The first and foremost, you need to segment the network. The idea is that you really need to create as many segments as you want that make sense for your situation, and to prevent lateral movement of threats. And deploy a gateway or cluster, right, for each of those segments to really grant access to the applications that live in those segments. Once you have that, you now need to define as fine-grained policies as you possibly can. Right? So you can create applications access policies in a very granular way, in the way that as feasible as you can. Right? So you need the right device compliance level for each application, as well as take into account location if you want, and other aspects that we talked about before. You then define user groups that have access to each of those applications. And then you define rules to assign these users to these groups. So you can have those specific rules only for the users who really need access to those particular applications. Okay. By the way, these rules should take into account the general responses for your identity and access management systems, your AAA systems, your SAML systems, whatever identity management system you have. But remember, these things are now being also enforced in the network itself. So you can even have a higher level, more, I would say, relaxed permissions on the identity level, and you can have very fine-grained policies on the network. Obviously, we always want to have them in as close as possible, but we know that these things can get out of sync. So the network aspect of the policies can really help you in curtailing accesses that should have been lost because of the life cycle of a user. And then the final point, integrates to automate. So obviously export the events that I noticed, all these things we talked about, the risk events, the anomaly events, to a CM for your aggregate analysis. I think everybody will do that. But leverage the anomaly detection to narrow the investigation focus. Create your processes to look into those anomalies that the system will bring up, so you can prioritize the investigation. And so really you can use the best, make the best use of the resource you have from your SecOps teams. And of course, our solution allows integration with other components of the Ivanti portfolio, which is one of them is the neurons for healing, which allow you automatic remediation of device non-compliances. So that's a big aspect too, to help on the overall automation. And here's a very important point. It's very nice that you have the ability to detect that the device is non-compliant, but you also don't want to be just sending emails to the users instead telling, hey, you can't access this application, file an IT support ticket for that. So you really want to make sure to take the human out of that loop as much as you possibly can through the ability to automate the remediation. So that's basically what I had to present, and I would like to open up for questions.
All right, let's see. Vladimir, the first question, what are your thoughts on zero trust? Is it a strategy or a product or features? Vladimir?
So yes, thank you for that. So zero trust is fundamentally a strategy. So it's not just about a product or zero trust access, for example, or just an architecture. Zero trust in a sense, it's an overall philosophy that you really don't trust anything, right? You don't trust your user, you don't trust your device. You have to create this mentality of zero trust across your security strategy to make sure that you minimize the risks of the breaches and, of course, the consequences of those breaches. So it's a combination of products that manage access, also compliance of your devices, traffic, and different types of policies that are not part of network access, for instance, DLP, application access, and so on and so forth. So zero trust is an overall strategy for your company.
Very good. Thank you, Vladimir. That makes perfect sense. All right, the next question, what are the critical components of a zero trust strategy?
So that's obviously, this can be a very long discussion here. But if you look at the fundamentals, fundamental components for zero trust, of course, you need a good set of what we call zero trust network access components, like what we present to you today. You need to have very good microsegmentation components. There are many out there, so you can really understand the east-west traffic in your network and how to control that and detect anomalous behavior. You also need to understand how the users are logging into your network. So sometimes even you cannot even trust your users, as you know very well from a password management perspective. Phishing attacks are fundamentally one of the best ways to get access to your network. You can have the best possible infrastructure, but if your passwords are not done properly, they're not secured properly, or they are easy to social engineer out of your users, your network is going to get breached. So fundamentally, what we call a passwordless authentication model or zero sign-on model or passwordless access, depending on who you talk to, you can use different terminology, is a fundamental capability that should be included as in any zero trust strategy. I would say those are the fundamental things. Now a good access component, a good password management to enable passwordless authentication into your systems, and you do have other components, right? Your data loss prevention could be a CASB doing that type of capability as well, and you can grow from there. But make sure you can control who gets into your network and to the right applications. Make sure your passwords are secure, and you get protection from phishing, and make sure your data doesn't leave your network either by accident or by purpose. I would say those are the fundamentals for a zero trust.
Excellent. Thank you, Vladimir. That's good advice. I think the next question is more about perhaps the Ivanti platform. And the question is, how are you doing user authentication? You know, like passwords, multi-factor authentication, SSO, or say ready to go passwordless. Vladimir?
So the answer is fundamentally yes. It's all of them. So the products support all these capabilities, and different users, depending on their maturity level, will be at different stages. But we do recommend our customers to really go into a passwordless model to really minimize the risk of social engineering of the phishing attacks. But we do have all those capabilities in our products, and we encourage our customers to use them to protect the integrity of the passwords.
All right, looks like we have time for one more question. Let's see, Vladimir, next or last question is, what challenges do you see when it comes to securing access to applications and resources?
So the biggest challenge here is maintaining consistency. And when you, especially when you look into the context of SASE, things can get really complicated. You're now talking, you're mixing application access that's on-prem or on a virtual private cloud. Then you have SaaS applications that your users have access to that. And those, on a good zero trust model, these cloud applications or SaaS, they would be protected by CASBs to control what operations are okay, if the proper DLP policies are enforced. And then you have, of course, your secure app gateways to control to malware protection. You have many other components in your solution, and you need to create a consolidated policy across all these components, and it's very, very hard. And so there are many strategies for you to overcome that. And depending on the stage of maturity of the customers, and my fundamental recommendation is to basically do some sort of service chaining for those that come from the background who understand what I'm talking about. But the idea is that you use a ZTNA gateway also as a gateway into those other components. So your traffic, your users can continuously be monitored for device compliance, and you have the ability of taking real-time action in a very simple way across all your applications. And so not just to your on-prem application or private application, but also against your SaaS and even traditional internet accesses. So you having that unified platform is the biggest challenge from an operational perspective, and I believe we do have a very good solution to that problem.
Excellent. I think that was a great closing statement, Vladimir. And just to remind our audience, for more information about the solution, just take a look at the web address URL that's shown on the screen for more details on Ivanti's Zero Trust Security platform. And with that, we're at the finish line for today's session. And Vladimir, thank you so much for sharing your insights on how to better secure the remote workforce through Zero Trust. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. And yeah, as I said, we're at the finish line of today's session. And as we're closing this webinar, I would like to thank all of you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. Now, this concludes today's session. I hope we will see all of you again at one of our future webinars. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.